The 1970s are synonymous with a lot of things. Whether it be the Vietnam War, Watergate, or the Beatles breaking up, the United States was changing, and fast. Music started to sound different, fashion started to look different, and the youth was unsatisfied, refusing to grow up in the world that their parents' generation left for them. It was also around this time that a new generation of filmmakers took center stage, ready to shake up the industry and forever change the medium as we know it. Ladies and gentlemen, New Hollywood. Also referred to as the American New Wave, this movement spanned from the late 60s to around 1980, when the contemporary period was ushered in. Unlike the decades prior, young adults were making up an overwhelming majority of moviegoers, and more importantly, ticket sales. Tired of the formulaic black and white films of yesteryear, young audiences craved something new, something edgier, something exciting. Major studios knew this, and they knew they'd have to take risks, desperately trying not to fall into obscurity with television at its most popular. Paving the way for the explosion to come were films like Bonnie and Clyde, Easy Rider, and The Graduate, movies that depicted sex, drugs, and violence, all of which were seen as taboo and hardly touched upon in the years prior. The films were hits with the youth in revolt and profits for the studios, solidifying that a new age of American cinema was upon us. American audiences had moved on from the glamorous Hollywood features that would conclude with a happy ending because that wasn't how they felt, and that wasn't the direction the world was trending toward. People were dying in a country they didn't belong in, their supposed leader was in fact a crook, and the future seemed bleak and uncertain. As films like Midnight Cowboy and The Last Detail started to depict a dirtier, more cynical side of life, audiences began to feel more represented and were more easily able to connect the pessimism they saw on screen with the pessimistic times they were living through. A film like Chinatown that portrays political corruption and the danger of power released the same year Nixon resigned. The film adaptation of Kurt Vonnegut's anti-war novel Slaughterhouse-Five released in 1972, the same year with the highest recorded casualties in the Vietnam War. Racism and other instances of prejudice were finally being confronted in a way that movies before often ignored. The films were challenging, forcing viewers to question themselves and the world they live in. As is consistent throughout recorded history, the art was representing the time in which it was created, and it was more than evident. One of the largest impacts New Hollywood had on American culture and the film industry at large was the introduction of the movie brats, most notably Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, and Brian De Palma. Part of the first generation of directors that studied film in college, this group had a great appreciation for world cinema and the cinematic movements of the past, showing great admiration for Godard, Truffaut, and Kurosawa, just to name a few.
I didn't really experience foreign films until I found my way into film school. And at that point is when I was actually exposed to Kurosawa.
Rossellini and De Sica.
Rossellini first, and then Fellini. It's not enough to call Fellini a filmmaker. He was a maestro.
When you think of like a truly great filmmaker, and certainly Kurosawa is one of the greatest.
With this influence, these filmmakers bridged the gap between Hollywood and the rest of the world, employing stylistic and narrative techniques reminiscent of French New Wave, Japanese New Wave, and Italian neorealism. By blending international film history with American sensibilities and Hollywood trademarks, the movie brats made dozens of pop culture staples, including the very first blockbuster.
Was it good?
Very frightening.
Very tasty.
Shark really exists, or was it?
I really don't know.
Well, we're not going to swim anymore.
Jaws was a smash hit, breaking box office records and cementing the young Spielberg as a household name. Just 2 years later, George Lucas would release his follow-up to American Graffiti.
Star Wars. It is more than just a successful movie, it is a box office phenomenon.
And it changed everything. The medium was now capable of creating hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and money would now play an even bigger part in studio decisions, just as it does today. A new formula was created by the same generation that wanted so badly to break away from the one that came before them, which is pretty ironic. This isn't to say that Spielberg or Lucas are to blame for the eventual decline of the movement. They aren't. It's the Hollywood executives that were willing to greenlight any film that would turn a profit that killed the revolution. Plenty of amazing movies came before and after this era, but there was something about the disruptive energy and experimentation that came between 1967 and 1977 that was just pure magic, and it remains my favorite decade when it comes to the history of film, without question. Let me know in the comments what some of your favorite movies are from this period, and be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.